My name's Samantha Rees. I'm from the Australian Apartment Advocacy. Welcome today to talk about cladding and the steps to provide greater protection. And this is a passion for Peter Hofsteter and Clint, Gavin and myself, and also David Hill from Network Architectural, who's in the room as well. So just quickly before we introduce our guest speakers, I guess what I would like to do, because some of you actually may not be aware of the Australian Apartment Advocacy, but we actually are the voice of 2.5 million people in Australia who choose to live in an apartment. We provide educational resources such as the Zoom event today. We also lobby on behalf of apartment owners for greater consumer protection. We do research with apartment owners, and we can also get involved and help mediate if there's any issues that an apartment owner might have with their strata manager or body corporate manager, their neighbours, builders or developers. I guess it keeps us busy here at the Australian Apartment Advocacy, that is for sure. And we've been around for 7 years, and we have a number of things that we hold very dear to our heart. We certainly would like every apartment owner, when they purchase an apartment or live in an apartment, to do so with complete confidence. And that includes meaning that your combustible cladding is not on the exterior of your building. And we're trailblazers, we're tenacious, we're passionate, we believe in best practice, and we like to empower our community, whether that's apartment owners or whether that's developers or builders or body corporate or strata managers. It's all about making informed decisions. And that's why we have got Peter and Clint with us today, because informed decisions are very important when you are talking about cladding. Afternoon, Peter.
Okay, unmuted.
Yeah,
good afternoon, Sam.
Hi, Peter, and hi, Clint.
Hello, Sam. How are you? Can you see me yet?
No, we're not, but that's okay. We'll come to a full picture at the end when we finish the PowerPoint slides. All right, so Peter's going to start us off, and Peter and I met at a function that we recently held in Queensland, and it was Help We Have Defects, What Do We Do Next? And I was standing with Peter and a range of engineers, and I said, I think the AS 5113 should be mandated. And Peter said, so do I. And what he said next to me, in fact, blew me away, and that's why I've got him on today to talk to us. Now, we'll talk about AS 5113, and please don't get confused by all the terminology that goes around. It basically means a large-scale testing, and at the moment it's not mandated, but it's something that we would love to see mandated, or something similar, as Clint would say. So I'm going to leave it with you, Peter, to kind of like take the reins, and you tell me when you want me to move to the next slide.
Okay, so next slide, please. Sam's asked me to talk because I've been involved as a building certifier since 1994, and I specialise in commercial buildings, which means I don't do houses, garages and carports. And I was part of the building industry for the 20-odd years where we were all in the process of business of approving cladding on buildings, which later turned out to be combustible. We didn't know it. And so the reason for wanting to talk about this now is that we don't want to make the same mistake again.
I totally agree.
So Sam's asked me to give a bit of a background, as you as apartment owners are now in a really tough position. And as a building certifier, I'm one of the people that ended up putting you in this position. And so Sam's asked me to just give a bit of background. So how do we get to this situation? And it's because the building code was not a perfect document, and there were gaps in the legislation. ABC's Four Corners program, after the Lacrosse fire in Melbourne in 2014, ABC did an investigation, and what they found was that there are manufacturers and suppliers who knowingly sell products to the Australian market that are not fit for purpose. We now know that these same manufacturers were busy selling their products across the world because cladding fires have been happening in all the developed countries of the world. And to explain the gaps in the Australian system, I produced a video on the Certis Group YouTube channel. It's video number 36, and it's a 20-minute explanation of how and why the panels were allowed to be approved. But we're not going to be watching that right now. You can go and find that. And so that's how cladding came to be on your building. The situation that you're now faced with is replacing those panels. And how do we get into that situation? Well, because of the cladding fires, next slide, please, Sam. Because of the cladding fires, the politicians needed to respond, and they needed to respond. They wanted to respond quickly, but in each state responded differently. And the problem was that the responses from the politicians appear to have been done without understanding the science. There was an idea that we must have non-combustible cladding on the building, and so the legislation was changed to require everything to be non-combustible. And what that meant was that there's a whole lot of panels on buildings that don't actually spread fire, but they're not non-combustible, because the definition of non-combustible means it must not burn. Whereas the issue is a combustible product means it will burn. There's a difference between it will burn and it can be burnt. And so the building code doesn't distinguish between that subtlety. And so unfortunately, a lot of panels that can be burnt, but they do not burn, means that they're being asked to replace.
So the analogy you used, Peter, was that, wood can burn, but wet wood can't, right? Even though it's combustible. So wet wood is combustible, but it's very unlikely to burn, whereas dry wood is combustible. So it's the kind of same analogy, isn't it?
It is. It's the other one where it said that some of these panels, even if you had a stack in the back of the ute, you couldn't start a campfire with them, even though they're not non-combustible. Yeah. That's one of the problems with the definition.
And of course, it's not just the panels that you have to be conscious of, Peter. There's the glue, there's the insulation. So, like that's what we're going to talk about later, isn't it? It's about why we want to look at that large scale testing.
Yes. Yeah, the panel is just one part. And it was a big part.
Yeah.
So the building code has been amended several times since the Grenfell fire. And it's got greater clarity, but it's still not a perfect document.
How do we make it perfect? Is it possible to make it perfect?
Probably not. To make a perfect document, you'd have to cover every single scenario. Yeah. And because products are being developed, systems are being new installation methods. Back in the 1990s, the Building Codes Board recognized that it's not possible to make a perfect document. And so that's why it was changed to a performance-based document. So we've got to use judgment to comply with the performance clauses.
And that's why that testing is so important, right?
And yes. So I did another video called about combustible cladding. This was about the Australian Standard 5.1, the 1530 Part 3 test. And this is the test that all aluminium composite panels can pass, and it was the test that allowed these panels to get on the buildings. And I say that the building code is still an imperfect document because this test is still referenced without any sanction on it. Like I think this test is completely inappropriate for a product that has a non-combustible surface, which is what an aluminium composite panel has. And yet the building code hasn't been modified to say you can only use a 1530 Part 3 test for products that are combustible, have a combustible surface. So when we move to deemed to satisfy solutions, deemed to satisfy means the building code has already approved them. So if you're looking to replace panels on your building, you could go down the deemed to satisfy path. And one of them is solid aluminium. We know that solid aluminium doesn't burn, so it ticks the box and it won't spread fire via the facade, which is part of the whole knee-jerk reaction that the legislators brought in. But there's other problems that solid aluminium can have, such as it could increase the heat load of the building. Solid aluminium, because it conducts heat readily, as it heats up, it could put a bigger heat load into the building, which could affect the air conditioning system. In some of the tests, some of the 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 large scale facade tests, some of the panels heated up so quickly that they twisted and sheared the fixings, and the whole panel fell down, which means that a 25 to 30 kilo missile would fall off the building. Cavity barriers could be needed behind solid aluminium to reduce the quick spread of heat. And because there's a lot more aluminium up there, as the aluminium melts in the fire, it drips. With an aluminium composite panel, there's not a lot of aluminium to drip down, whereas molten aluminium is a real danger to occupants and firefighters. So they're just a couple of other risks with solid aluminium.
And Peter, those panels, what kind of weight would they be if they came down from, like, you know, if they were 45 stories high and
I'm told they're about
down?
25 to 30 kilos.
Yeah, right. So it's a missile, like you said, right? So
yes. One of the things I saw a fire engineer talking about the Grenfell fire, and he said that the debris that was falling off that building was so light and friable that the police were able to hold up their riot shields and create a tunnel for the firefighters to enter the building. That wouldn't be possible if it was solid aluminium.
No, that would be an aluminium composite. So
yeah. So another deemed to satisfy panel is bonded laminated materials. And this is where you have 3 layers. There's 2 outside skins of aluminium and a non-combustible ore. Now, some of the non-combustible, and then they're glued together. And so the building code says we've got 3 layers of non-combustible material glued together with a maximum of 2 millimeters of glue. Well, a lot of the aluminium composite panels that were combustible had 3 millimeters of polyethylene. And I'm inclined to think that 2 millimeters of glue would burn just as easily as 3 millimeters of glue, but it's deemed to satisfy. And so we don't know what that glue is going to do.
And that's the unknown factor, which is why when you say you need to do the testing, it needs to have everything else, you know, combined together.
Yeah, can you just go back to that previous slide, please, Sam?
Sure can.
The color, the blue stuff that's there, that's the glue. This photo was sent to me by a builder who, when he was doing all this cutting and for the panels, he wrote to me and sent me this photo and said, "Are you concerned about this glue?" And and it started me thinking about it. Yeah. And because then because of that, I've got another video and I'll show you what that is in a moment.
Yeah.
Other deemed to satisfy solutions is fiber cement. And a lot of architects don't like fiber cement as a finish because it needs to be painted, it needs to be treated, it could be rendered. The fixings are often on the surface. And as I said earlier, one of the beauties of aluminium composite panels is that there's a nice smooth finish to them. But fiber cement is deemed to satisfy. And then steel panels. These also, they don't have the problem of dripping molten aluminium, as they won't drip, but they could have similar heat transmission issues. And so when you're looking at products to put on your building, it's really important to look at the cost of the whole system, not just the cost of the panel.
Correct. And also removal, like think about the removal of the panels as well as part of the quoting process too.
Yes. Yeah. So I've gone into a lot more detail on what my concerns are about deemed to satisfy panels. And that's video number 39 on the Certis YouTube channel. And in that, I talk about the AS5113 large-scale facade test, which is what we're going to talk about next, Sam.
Yes, we are.
And so what this test is based on the British standard, and it's a large-scale test. It's a 15-meter high wall with a decent-sized firebox at the bottom, 500 kilos of timber. And the beauty of this test is by assembling a wall and having a good-sized fire at the bottom of it, you get to see whether or not fire will spread up the building because of the panel. Now, this test is not mandatory in the building code. And when Sam and I first met, she would really like to see it become part of the building code. It's not a cheap test. It's at least I'm told it's about $70,000 to run one of these tests.
But from my perspective, if you're putting $2 million worth of cladding, and I've actually got two buildings in Victoria where the cladding cost is $200 million, what you do want to do is spend $70,000 on the test, Peter, and know with peace of mind you're not going to be going through this experience again down the track. And the last thing you want is your insurance company to revoke your insurance because of the cladding on the building, right?
That's right. So, so from my perspective, although this test isn't mandatory, I think it's really, really advisable. And it's the only way that I, as a certifier, could be sure that the unknown aspects of the glue aren't going to spread fire.
Yeah. Can I ask a question, Peter?
Sure.
When you talk about the unknown glue obviously in the other types of panels, what about solid aluminium? There's no glue in solid aluminium, but none of them will do a 5113 test. Why is that the case?
No. Well, the problem with the 511, one of the problems with the 5113 test is that when they adapted it from the British standard, they added a few other bits and pieces that makes it virtually impossible for any panel to pass the test.
Yeah. And one of those is about debris, isn't it? The size of the debris. So
yes. Yeah, the amount of debris that falls off the building, the Australian standard said a maximum of 2 kilos. And there's always going to be stuff falling off. Yeah. The solid aluminium will drip more than 2 kilos in the test.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
Is that this is what the test, the 5113 large-scale facade test looks like. And something's happened?
No, it's okay. I went offline quickly, but I'm back again.
Oh, okay. And what you can see is that's the fire at the bottom sends up a large lick of flame that climbs up, and the only part of that facade that is burning is the part that's directly impacted by the flame. And so what this shows is what I call a successful test. It won't pass the debris test, so it can't pass the test absolutely, but in terms of what the 5113 test can do is that it can demonstrate that a product or a system won't spread fire.
And that's important because if the fire starts at the bottom, we don't want it going up, Peter.
Yeah, and that's where I come back to this definition. That the definition of non-combustible means it does not burn, but non-combustible I reckon could also be expanded. So it can be burnt, but it doesn't support a flame.
Yeah, it doesn't actually spread, correct.
Yeah. And so then I want to talk about a product that has passed the 5113 by showing that it doesn't spread fire. When it was installed with a particular method, it was installed with cavity barriers, fire-rated mastic, non-combustible sarking, which is an expensive system. But by installing this way, this particular product was able to demonstrate that fire didn't spread via the facade. However, when the product was installed without all those extra things, this video shows that the panels do spread fire.
All right, you ready?
Yep.
So this does alarm me because, you know, like this would have been approved and installed on a building, and then look at what actually happens. You know, this is what we don't want to see happen, Peter, isn't it?
That's right.
Because look how quickly that is moving up that building too.
Oh, that is sped up.
Yeah, I understand that, but it's moving pretty quickly.
Yeah, so I've never seen that video in real time. I've only ever been given a copy of this and I use it because it appeals to the inner pyromaniac that lurks inside most building certifiers, or some building certifiers. I like to say that a fire engineer is just a pyromaniac with the calculator. But that video shows really clearly why it's important that the installation has got to be the same as the 5113 as how it was installed.
How is it?
Demonstrator pass.
That's right. What's the
I've talked to
yeah.
And bearing in mind that the 5113 test is not mandatory. So I've talked to a number of suppliers who have said to me, look, our product is deemed to satisfy. And I've said, I agree, it's deemed to satisfy, but if I'm going to be approving it on a building that I'm the certifier for, then I've got to be sure that your product is not going to spread fire via the facade. And the only way that I can do that is to ask for the results of a 5113 test. And if you've chosen not to do that test, then I will only approve your product on single-story buildings or type C construction, or in small isolated panels, not a full facade. And I go into details on the video about on video 39 about deemed to satisfy panels, where I've actually set out these are the criteria on which I'm prepared to certify. Because remember, I was part of the industry that approved the panels in the first place by following the deemed to satisfy path, and I don't want to blindly follow the deemed to satisfy path again.
Yes.
So that's why I'm advocating for greater questioning. Ask more questions.
Yes.
So some of the issues that the certifier will consider as part of the recladding, it should include the combustibility of the products, the insulation that's being used, that's got to be non-combustible, whether cavity barriers are needed. Cavity barriers block the gap behind the panel, between the panel and the rest of the wall. Structural adequacy. On a lot of buildings, when you're replacing existing panels, a structural engineer will need to assess whether the existing structure can take the new panel because they may be a different weight. Weatherproofing is important, and the manufacturer's installation details. These should all be assessed as part of the certification process.
Yeah, and so often we hear, don't we, Peter, that they remove the waterproof, they remove the cladding, and then the waterproofing behind is an absolute debacle as well. So, if you're going to remove the cladding, just be mindful that that may not be the only thing that you may have to deal with once you actually take it off the building.
The insulation as well. The existing insulation might be combustible.
Yes, true. Yes.
So then non-certification aspects, the two big ones that I've heard from architects and building owners is, one of them is oil canning, and the image on the left shows panels that are not flat. And one of the beauties of aluminium composite panels is that they have a really nice flat surface, which is what architects want. And I'm told that the solid aluminium doesn't quite get the same flatness. And then resistance to hail is another one. A cheaper panel is likely to have thinner aluminium skins, which are more readily damaged by hail. And so that's a consideration that you as building owners would need to consider. And I think that's really all I've got to say in terms of the background and from the certification point of view at this stage.
You do, Peter. Thank you. What we'll do is we'll go on to Clint, then we'll come back to questions. But I've got to say, how many times I'm involved in AGM meetings where, they're discussing quotes and they go for the cheapest quote. Please remember, it's cheap for a reason, right? And especially with something that's going to be on the exterior of your building. So it has to look good, it has to be durable, and it has to be non-combustible, and it has to be also long-standing. So we're going to pop across now to Clint, who's going to kind of take us through a bit of a checklist,
You can't see me. You still can't see me, can you?
Let me see what we can do here.
It's not a bad thing.
No, Clint, we can't, darling.
No, I don't know why.
Yeah,
I don't know why. You turned your camera off on the laptop.
I've got a good head for radio, not for television.
It worked on Teams. I don't know why it's not working here.
Yeah.
All right, so Clint, off you go, darling. We'll keep.
Yeah. Anyway, so my name's Clint Gavin, and I'm National Sales Manager for Network Architectural. So thanks for joining us. I see there's a couple of familiar names in the list of people that are looking on, from prominent builders to people down in Victoria who are having all sorts of trouble with their cladding on the wall and the support they're getting from government organisations. I guess what we're trying to look at is a few things to consider, or what the builders, the builders owners, the strata managers, the owners corporation need to sort of ask prior to actually just going full scale into recladding a building. And you quite often get, council orders saying you need to remove the panel. But the first thing you should do is to look at engaging a fully qualified fire engineer. And what they do is they come along and take a small sample. They'll find out if the material is flammable, if it is, what percentage of polyethylene it has, and also what the rating it gives on the Insurance Council of Australia's safety rating. But what you need to do is look at the professionals in the industry. Like there's so many people that have come along since there's reports of the claddings all have been removed, and there's people opening up businesses saying that they're cladding experts, rectification companies, remediation companies, who are just going to come in and tell you, the building owner, that it's all got to come off and all needs to be replaced. And it's not the case. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to sort of work with you guys, which is why we got involved with Sam at the Australian Apartment Advocacy, to actually work with the owners and the people that are actually having these issues, because it's not your fault that you bought a property that has, now we find out it's got combustible cladding on it, and you have to spend $100,000, $60,000, whatever it is, to have it rectified.
It's certainly a nasty shock, isn't it? I have had just a recent case where $1.1 million and the builder had gone bust, Clint, and so they had to actually pitch that in between 100 apartments. So no one wants to have that kind of bill, do they?
Absolutely, and a lot of people, and like a lot of people in Strata are people that are, they might be retirees. They don't have a disposable income coming in, and they just have to rely on their savings. And I mean, we don't think it's fair. And one of the first things I get asked is what are the options with funding considerations? Like who's going to pay for it? Because the building owners, the body corporate, the Strata, they quite clearly and fairly don't believe that they should have to be the ones to put their hands in the pocket and fork out the money. So, I mean, you look at all the different the councils and governments around the country that have formed loans. In New South Wales, for example, the New South Wales Building Commissioner launched Project Remediate, and it's an interest-free loan where the money needs to be paid back at the end, and it's obviously low interest, and it gives them assurance that it's all going to be done properly, and it's all going to be done in a way that they're not going to have any problems moving forward. South Australia just had a cladding loan scheme release, the same as Cladding Safety Victoria have a loan scheme. Now, whether or not Cladding Safety Victoria are actually performed the required support to all the people that are in this situation is to be debated, and I'm sure someone down here listening would agree with me.
Well, unfortunately, I think when they raised that 600 million levy, Clint, for the Cladding Safety Victoria, they didn't actually realise that it wouldn't go as far as they thought, and so that's where we've got the problem, isn't it?
Yeah, it doesn't take long to, the amount of buildings that have polyethylene, 100% polyethylene cladding on them in the country is astronomical. And like Project Remediate, it started out at 250 odd buildings, and it's down to 100 odd buildings that are actually following through with it, because the costs are exorbitant, but the costs are higher with Project Remediate, but you get that level of assurance.
Yeah.
And one of the other funding options that sort of not many people talk about is the class action that's available to people that have certain types of cladding on their building. And the class action is run by Omni Bridgeway, and it actually protects the people that have this cladding on it that was supplied by two of the major suppliers in the country that now have these class actions against them. And it's the class actions are there because they knowingly sold material that was not fit for purpose.
And Fairview was one of those. We've met with Omnibridge, and basically they're going with that class action if you sign up or not. So if you have got that product on your building, please make sure that you do sign up to that class action, because as I spoke to Omnibridge, they said they don't do a class action unless they know they're going to win. So they're obviously expecting to come into.
Absolutely. And people can contact me if they want more information on where to go and who to talk to, whether it's in Project Remediate or the South Australian Loan Scheme or Omni Bridgeway. We're happy to help. We're happy to try and help with the identification
Yeah.
A guy rang me the other day and he said, how much is it going to cost you to come out and actually have a look for us? And the answer was nothing. It's, you know, we're not here to create more pain. We're here to try and provide a solution, and with as little pain as possible for the building owners.
And certainly, you know, cladding is a very complicated matter, and it needs to be handled by the correct personnel, right, Clint?
Absolutely. And one of the things that, you know, we try and encourage people is look beyond the people that have just come into the market. All of a sudden they're just popping up because they're cladding experts and they don't even know what an aluminium composite panel looks like.
Yeah.
I mean, we should all be working with professionals, whether it's facade engineers, certified like Peter that just spoke before, fire engineers, even down to our level, site suppliers. You know, like, I mean, we've all got to be looked at. We've all got to be assessed, and you know, we're looking now at doing the iCert rating as a supplier to show that we're above board, we're doing the right thing. And on top of that, you know, just don't trust these remediation companies that come along and say everything's got to come off. I mean, look to work with builders that have been in the game for a long time and understand cladding, and they know the pitfalls. They know how to manage a project, not just something that's happened straight away. And I mean, classic examples of that, you know, in New South Wales, builders who have gone through the iCert ratings as well, such as Buildcorp, you know, they do the right thing and they look for the best possible option. So if you engage with professionals, you know, you're on the right track. But just stay away from all the. This is not like the insulation scandal that happened so many years ago. Every truck you saw driving down the road was an insulation supplier. This is a cladding issue that needs to be fixed by cladding professionals. You know, like if you walk into a government building and the light needs change, you need to call a qualified electrician. If you need to fix 300 square meters or 1,000 or 10,000 square meters of cladding on the side of the building, there's no accreditation required. There's no course that you need to do. It's just some cowboy can go and do it, which is why
no licensing.
And we as a company at Network, we've made that decision. Yeah, we will not supply to anyone. We will only supply through our accredited installers and our accredited fabricators to try and bring the standard back up, and also assist with the warranty that comes with our public product.
And so we were just talking about the AS 5113 not being mandatory, but how many of those tests have you done at Network Architectural, Clint, to make sure that your product combinations are in fact compliant?
Well, too many, a lot. We've done it in over 10 tests now, and they are $70,000. But one of the things that you mentioned in Peter's presentation is that, you know, if you're going to spend $200 million on a rectification, you know, if you're going to, you should spend the $70,000 on doing a 5113 test. Now it's not actually the case, because us as a supplier, we're the ones who are supplying the material, we're the ones putting our name behind the material, we're the ones who are backing it with the system, and that's why we're prepared to do the test. So it should be the suppliers backed with the manufacturers who put together the test and spend $70,000. You know, like we've done a number of tests, and the first one we didn't get it right. Like, we had no idea what we were doing, and we've learned all the way along these tests. We've learned different things that cause different problems. We've learned a hell of a lot about how fire performs. So we certainly recommend that all responsible manufacturers and suppliers should at least do the AS 5113, which is a large-scale test, even if it's just to provide evidence to a fire engineer, a certifier, to show that it doesn't spread, it doesn't come down in massive chunks, it doesn't put lives at risk. Do the test. You know, for $70,000, some of these, you know, suppliers are buying cheap rubbish out of China and selling it for exorbitant prices. They can afford $70,000 for a bit of peace of mind.
Well, and they don't want to pay the $70,000. I think
it will fail.
Yes, it will fail. That is
absolutely. But anyway, we've done 10 of them with different materials and different products, and tested different installations and all sorts of different things. And it's the way you learn. And you know, when all this stuff with Grenfell happened, there was a lot of things that we didn't really take into account. Like, we didn't even think about the debris, you know, like, and until a fireman got up there and said, well, how are you going to, like, a 20-kilo panel falling down hitting you on the head? They actually start thinking about all these things, and you see how solid aluminium performs in a real life fire, and it's scary, you know, the heat that comes off it, the debris that comes off it. It's just raining molten aluminium on people trying to exit the building. So we recommend, you know, like, we agree with Peter. Like, the test should be done. And it should be a supplier's obligation. It should be part of their responsibility to actually show the people who are looking to do the reclad that then not replacing a dangerous product with a dangerous product, which is what's going on at the moment.
Yeah, I agree.
And it just doesn't make sense.
So it's important that you get that warranty, like we were talking about. So, and as you were saying, those when you're thinking about your budget, like you've got to think about the total recladding cost, which is the contractors, builders, and council, as well as engineering certifications. You know, what else do you have to think about too with that, Clint?
Well, the warranty is something that really you really need to sort of take into account. You know, like some of these products are on the marketplace that are just they're imported from China. They source it from the cheapest possible factory at the time, and there's no manufacturer attached to it. So what you need to look for, and you should be asking for, is a warranty that is backed by a reputable manufacturer, not a local distributor. So Mitsubishi Alpolic, for example, is warranted by Mitsubishi. It's not warranted by Clint Gavin from Network, because if I get a $5 million claim or a $10 million claim on me, I'll go running like other people did when claims were put on them. So it needs to be a trusted, reputable company with strong backing. The Mitsubishi Alpolic warranty comes with a 20-year full rectification warranty. So if something happens, it's going to be replaced. And that covers labor, it covers access, it covers material, it covers removal, it covers the whole thing to actually fix the problem. Whereas the other suppliers, they come along and they give you a panel and say, here it is, you go and fix it. You hire a scissor lift or a scaffold and you get the labor to go and fix it. But that is only relevant if you've cleaned the facade twice a year. So there's all these hidden loopholes in all these warranties that it's just a way to get out of it. And that's why we only deal with reputable companies. We'll deal with the big names, the big brands, all the way through the system, whether it's Mitsubishi Alpolic, whether it's Dow Corning Silicons, whether it's Rondo Framing, it's all Rondo Framing. It's always a big brand name that's behind it, because we want to know what's behind us. So you really need to sort of do some investigations, not just about the material, but about the warranty of the product as well.
Yeah, and the conditions of those warranties. I agree with you.
Absolutely. And people are ripping off perfectly good material off a building because some Johnny come lately bloody rectification company comes up and says, yes, you should remove the whole lot. So they remove the whole lot, and the company doesn't even look at the installation. They don't look at what's behind there. And that's why you've got to engage professionals. You really, it should be the number one priority that you look at the ICERT ratings that, you know, like they've been created by Equifax on developers and builders and things like that, and soon to be suppliers, and actually work with the people that are known to the industry.
Yeah. And, you know, and that's when you come to us and talk to us, because like you say, if you think about all the money that's floating around with those levies, that's over $1 billion. There's always going to be companies that go, fantastic, look at that opportunity, let's hop in there and take advantage of that. But you were saying in New South Wales, Clint, that the whole Project Remediate and being on that panel of preferred suppliers, that was a really tough gig to get through in terms of then being accepted, correct?
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, we originally we weren't on the approved list of products, and we had to lobby, we had to test, and we had to test extensively and thoroughly to prove that the material that we had is actually a far safer product than the products that were being initially put onto Project Remediate. Now, I mean, much and then they came up with an additional test, and that was further testing required, and that's just solely for my product, basically, mainly for bonded laminates. And we thought, you know, we didn't know what was going to come and all sorts of stuff. But then all of a sudden they came out with the AS 1530.3. Now, as Peter's already explained, you know, if you've got a non-combustible face like aluminium with a 1530.3 test, then whatever happens in the core doesn't get exposed. So that's why they actually rejigged the AS 1530.3 test to include penetrations and holes, vertical joints, horizontal joints, to expose the core material to the flame or the heat lamp. But, you know, apart from fire, you know, like fire is one issue, and when you're looking at recladding your building, you know, you should also be asking for environmental product declarations and working with companies that are committed to sustainability and committed to the environment. And I can tell you that the amount of heat generated through solid aluminium is over 300% higher than it is with a bonded laminate material like Mitsubishi Alpolic. So your air conditioning costs are going to go through the roof. the CO2 emissions in the manufacturing are 3 times the amount, and none of them can get or have got an environmental product declaration. So there's a range of things to look for. You know, like I'm happy, anyone can give me a call. I mean, I've spoken to you know, a few people on this that I can see, a few names down there about problems that they're having in the industry and the market, and we're here to try and rectify it. You know, like we're not charging people to come out and see you. We're not charging people for advice. We're trying to point people in the right direction, because the industry, we want to be in it for a long time to come. And at the moment, it's been down in the dump, and we've been, you know, myself and the owner of Network have been to many owners corporation type meetings and body corporate meetings where people go there to try and get advice on what they're supposed to do with their building, and they walk away with nothing. And
I think that's important.
They walk away more confused, and that's why, you know, that your group, Sam, is important to try and get this knowledge to people and engaging, you know, like people like Peter as well, to explain the processes. It's important for the whole industry and the whole market. But you know, we feel the pain, and it's not the people who bought these buildings, it's not their fault that they bought a product that it was in good faith and they were told that it was a good material. It's just that the unethical, unscrupulous marketing and sales of some of these other people that have put them in this horrible position they're in.
Yes, and Shangri-La, as I put on the 7:30 report last year, is one of those, you know, and they actually got taken to the tribunal by Cladding Safety Victoria to actually cough up the 24.5 million that they had actually spent on Shangri-La or Bayside buildings. So there's definitely been, unfortunately, repeat offenders in the marketplace. But the good news is we're spreading the word. The good news is that Clint, you're having conversations with Stephen Kipp, and of course he's on the ABCB board, and so an influential part of how we actually may change some of this testing, so we can actually give people total confidence that if they do have to replace their cladding on their building, they are getting something that's going to actually perform over the life of the building and not just be another nightmare. Correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, the question you asked Peter earlier was, you know, is there anything that's a perfect system? And the answer is no. You know, we don't have a perfect system at the moment. We've got small scale testing that doesn't show how products perform. You've got large scale testing that no one can pass. I mean, we need to sort of look at something, and working with someone like Stephen Kipp, who is on the board, and he is a fire engineer, he understands things, is value, you know, it's valuable to us, it's valuable to the industry. Same as working with people like Peter to actually highlight what the issues are in the industry. You know? So collectively, the whole cladding facade industry really needs to start working together rather than pulling apart, and actually come up with a solution to that's foolproof. You know, like it's solid and it's not solid. That's a bad word. It's not solid.
It's robust.
But it's reliable and robust.
Robust.
Robust and reliable, and you know that you're going to sleep at night without any fear of something going on.
Well, I know I had a conversation with a gentleman probably a couple of years ago, and he said to me, Sam, you know, I've got the equivalent of 5 litres of fuel per square metre in the cladding that's on my building, and my grandchildren come to visit, and I'm fearful the entire time they're here that something may go wrong. And that's just mental anguish that must cause. You know, it's just not okay. So
absolutely. And I'll just finish with one last point, right? Network building suppliers, which is Network Architectural, we've been approached time and time again by people from China coming into our office telling us that we can supply you with solid aluminium, the same as what the other people get. We'll just cut the film off and put your film on and your name on it. We've been told that we can get the corrugated core product that's also on the market with the massive amounts of glue in it. And every one of those people have come in and said that we would look at selling your product if you prove that it's safe in a large scale fire test. So me, as someone who works for someone else, you know, we have effectively walked away from $500 million worth of business because we will not sell stuff that is dangerous, and will not sell stuff that cannot prove to be in some way safe on a large scale test. So
and
you
Clint,
know, you've got to put safety before profit, and that's it. Yeah. Thanks. Any questions, Your Honour? And
that's why Network Architectural is one of our sponsors, Clint, for that exact reason. Okay.
That's right.
So we have got time for questions. Would anyone like to ask a question? Otherwise, I will supply you, if it's okay with Peter and Clint, their contact details in the email where I send the link to the video, so you can reach out to them individually. Obviously, we can't do what we do without the support of our sponsors. I like to say that we get funding from government. Unfortunately, we don't, but I think what we do is still a very valuable service. And I certainly am very grateful for the likes of Peter Hofsteter and also Clint Gavin, because they're such gurus in this space. And when I started working with them last November, I did not know anything about cladding and combustibility and AS5113. And now I feel like I actually do, and it's because of these gentlemen. So it's a fantastic. So at this stage, we've got no questions. What I would like to say is obviously thank you everyone for tuning in today. Obviously, we have a number of people who've come from the Network Architectural Database, as well as also the Australian Apartment Advocacy Database. And like I said, we're videoing this or recording this session, so we will send it out. But also, if you have any questions that you would like to have raised with your body corporate or your committee or owners corporation, please remember that's when we can actually kind of like do a quick chat, or I can attend an AGM and talk about these things, because what we don't want is owners leaving the situation more confused. We want them to have true clarity. Peter, any last words before we?
Yes, my last word is, and I do see a name there that's been good enough to tune into the broadcast and all that sort of stuff. And she's from Melbourne. She's vocal. She's been through a hell of a lot of pain.
She has.
And she's trying to be a voice for everyone down there. And all I can say to people like that is we understand your pain. We understand that you were put in a really bad position. But there are professional companies. There are people like Peter Hofsteter. There are people like Clint Gavin. There are people like all of us. Like you
David P. Isaac.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's Stephen Kipps of the world. There's a lot of people out there that will try and do their best. And Jonathan Barnett's another one. Will try and do their best to actually come up with the right solutions, because we're all about safe buildings. We don't want to see people lives put at risk in any way, shape, or form. So before. And I know you've been down so many different paths avenues to try and get the resolution that you guys want, and it's driving people insane.
Okay.
But don't be scared to ring us, and don't be scared to get us our opinion and get our opinion, and we'll do everything we can to try and help and point everyone in the right direction.
And definitely get 3 quotes, people, because otherwise, if you and don't go with if the cheapest one, you look at it for apples and apples, and it may be even worth engaging someone like Peter to have a look at your quotes. And actually see which ones would actually be the most ideal. All right, Peter, any last words from you?
No, not really. Other than you talked about beware of cost. The thing when I'm considering anything to buy was something that was once told is quality lasts long after price is forgotten.
Yes, exactly right. That is correct. And when it comes to your asset, which might be worth 50 or 70 or 100 million, you want to make sure that you get that choice right, because I can tell you what, if you have to go back to your owners and tell them that that's not the case, there could be mutiny, correct? All right, well, thank you everybody for joining us today. Very nice to see you. I hope that you got some benefit from what we were talking about, and certainly I hope that we will see you at one of our other forthcoming events as we move into the second half of 2023. Thanks again, everybody, and I will send you that link, plus also Peter's and Clint's details. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you, Clint. Thank you, Kerry. Speak to you soon.
Thank you, Kerry. Bye.
Bye.